Hello, I'm Mystic Orange and this is video hashtag 684. In this video is both our 16 video and our Winx Club video. And in this video I want to talk about how a Winx Club universe could coexist with the 16 universe. Not only that, I want to talk about how the main characters of 16 and Winx Club, could meet with each other. And for this discussion, there's so many things to think about. Anyway, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let's get into this discussion. I think the first thing we need to do is distinguish both universes. I think for Winx Club universe and 16 universe, they're completely different from each other. For the 16 universe, it's much more realistic to our world. There's not even a hint of fantasy in 16. Because 16 focuses on realism. So in obvious reasons, it's kind of obvious in 16 you won't find any dragons or, fairies. I think that's an important thing to note. However, in the Winx Club universe, it's completely different. It's a fantasy sci-fi setting. And most of the things in Winx Club you wouldn't find in real life, at least from what we know. Like, do fairies really exist? Like most things in Winx Club are mostly theoretical. We can't prove these things exist because we don't have any evidence of those things existing. So that's an important thing to note as well. But I think it's also important to note is both of these shows are fiction and they're both cartoons. And in realm of fiction, anything can happen. So if we have to consider Winx Club and 16 are in the same universe, we still can make this work. I think to understand this, we have to understand the Winx Club universe. And we also need to understand where the 16 characters are in this universe as well. So in 16, we know that the main characters live in Canada, which is on Earth. We can establish that. And in the Winx universe, Earth does exist. This is the planet where Bloom, was brought up. It's the first planet we meet before she heads off to Magix, and we get introduced to the various universe of magical dimension. And what we know about the magical dimension is that it has various planets. We have Magix, Domino, Solaria, and of course we have Earth. I think to wrap our brains about this thing, we have to consider right now if 16 and Winx Club did share the universe, the 16 are living on Earth in the Winx Club universe. I know, it's kind of mind-blowing. So whatever is happening on 16, it is also happening in Winx Club. And we kind of have to know the law about Winx Club, about Earth. It's just like how the Earth is in our world. Same thing as 16's Earth is in our world, because it's Earth, it's our world. And it's important to know most people on Earth would probably not believe in magic. For the most part, fantasy wouldn't be in our radar. I mean, in real life there are people who might believe in these things. However, we do not have empirical evidence of these things. So by default, most people are like this. So this is kind of true for the citizens on Earth, on Winx Club universe, on Earth. And this is obviously true for the people on 16. Obviously, they won't inherently believe in these things because they don't have the empirical evidence. And also considering the characters of 16, I think the most likely character to believe in these things would be Jude. I think he's just an example of the people who would believe in these things. He kind of thinks outside the box. And we also kind of have to consider like in 16 it's not a fantasy, but we know that. At least from what we are seeing, obviously, fantasy doesn't exist. But that's like from our viewpoint. As well as the characters of 16. We just don't know what we can't see. Like, so who knows? In the 16 universe, there's probably a fairy entering their planet, and they don't know about it. The best way to put it is like, there are things we can't see, and also there are things we don't have evidence of, but they could still exist. And this still could be true about 16. Like, even though, like, we have to put in mind it's a fictional show, fantasy could still exist in 16. All we need to do is think outside the box. So there is a potential of like 16 start believing in magic now. I think the fact that in Winx Club we have season 4, and in that season, like the people on Earth start to believe in magics. And this could include people from Canada, like 16. I'm sure in the Winx Club universe anyway, the Winx go to Canada at some point in season 6 or 7. I haven't watched season 6 and 7 fully yet, but I have heard rumors. So at some point in season 6 or 7, it's possible like Winx Club to meet the 16 characters. Also at that stage, the 16 characters, as well as the rest of the people on Earth, are probably more likely to believe in magic at default. If we had to consider season 4 events in 16. I think from that point, the universe in 16 will be completely different. I think they will start, be accepting of people of Winx Club. Okay, now we have the understanding of how the 16 universe could coexist with the Winx Club universe. Since we covered that, now it's time to think about how the main characters of Winx Club could meet the main characters of 16. Anyway, let's talk about how the characters of Winx Club and 16 could meet. I think for this to work, I think the characters of Winx Club needs to make the move. Because they're the ones who will enter Earth. So imagine this will be the season 9 of Winx Club or the season 5 of 16. I think the characters of Winx Club will soon adapt to the environment of 16. They will have to start, getting a job and things like that, and make a living on Earth. Maybe there's a mission that they need to stay on Earth so they can, adapt to the 16 lifestyle. And who knows, maybe along the way, maybe 16 could learn about magic and fairies and they get adapted to the Winx Club universe. Maybe these characters could end up being fairies, witches, or specialists. Who knows? And if we're going to talk about the main characters of Winx Club, we already have like 6 characters of Winx Club and 6 characters of 16. It is possible that the characters of 16 could have already, met someone from Winx Club already. Like the characters who already exist on Earth. So, for example, Mitzi and Roxy. I think they would be in somewhere in the, USA. I don't know where they would be. I think in the Cinellium dub, the place of Gardenia is based on Canada anyway. So in the Ray dub, they're going to be in Canada. So at some point, Roxy would have met, the 16 characters. And it's also possible that Mitzi would have met at least one of them, possibly Caitlyn or maybe Trisha. I think she has more chance of meeting the 16 characters because I think if you think about who travels more often, Mitzi or Roxy, I think Mitzi would more likely to travel more. Roxy kind of makes me think of like if she went on a holiday, she would rather go on a countryside or like, on a beach. She probably wouldn't go out adventurous in like new cities or wherever. She prefers comfort. For Mercy, she would love the luxurious life of meeting everywhere. She gives me like rich personality, like Regina George. I also think if we're gonna consider characters, Mitzi and Trisha would be an awesome pairing because they share the same like mean girl energy. They either would get along or their egos will be too big that they will butt heads with each other. It's interesting to think about. Anyway, I can see the vision now. The Winx girls entered the Galleria Mall from 16. The 16 gang are already at the table. And obviously, Caitlin is at her lemon. She's handing out juice to her friends and some customers. Stella and the girls will probably go for shopping. However, they need some refreshments and, to sit down and, talk about the events. And this is how the Winx girls and the 16 characters meet. Also, in terms of animation, I think it's best the 16 characters were in the animation of Winx Club all. If they are put in the same animation, it would look good. I think as an extrovert, Stella would be the first to, introduce herself to the characters. I think eventually, like, these characters will make friends with each other. And the Winx girls would have to, have a job in this Galleria Mall. And surely the characters of 16 would help them out on that. Also, there's obvious distinction between the groups. For the Winx characters, there are 6 girls. And in the 16 characters, there are 3 boys and 3 girls. So by ratio, there will be 3 boys to 9 girls. I think romance will play a lot in this version if the two groups meet. I also need to point out like the 6 main characters of Winx Club, they all have boyfriends. I will talk about that in later time. But first of all, let's talk about friendship and who will, get along with who. I think the easiest pairing would be Caitlin and Stella. I think both of them will get along with each other really well. They both like fashion and shopping, so obviously they will get along. Obviously, Kaylin is a bit more, materialistic, and Stella is a bit more creative when it comes to shopping and fashion. So obvious, with no hesitation, these two will get along. Secondly, I think Jan is likely to either get along with Bloom, Flora, or Layla. I think Jan would likely get along with Bloom because they both share like this leadership quality about them, and they are kind of like the headstrong characters. And I think Jen might get along with Flora because they both have that, empathetic. They give advice to their friends. They have that comforting persona about them. And I think Jen would get along with Layla because they're both competitive, they're both athletic, they like sports, and they're both like serious. They want things to, go things right. I think that for the most part, Jen is most likely to gravitate towards Bloom the most. For Nikki, I think she'd either get along with Tekna and Musa. For one thing, with Tekna and Nikki, well, they're gonna, enjoy each other's company because they both have like dyed hair. Like Tekna has a pink fuchsia hair and Nikki has purplish hair. And I kind of can see them working out with each other. And I also can see, like, Nikki getting along with Misa. I think for one thing, they're both Asians. So that's one thing they will have in common. And I also think both Musa and Nikki are snarky characters. And I think they will enjoy each other's company. I think in comparison to both, I think Nikki's more tough compared to Musa. I think Musa does have her tough moments, but not as Nikki does. For Wyatt, I think he'd either get along with Musa, Layla, or Flora. With Musa, Wyatt shares the love for music, just like Musa does. And I think they would get along with that level. And maybe Wyatt could get along with Layla because they both share the same race as black characters. Maybe they would have connection there with each other. And Wyatt likes coffee, and Flora, she's, likes to make tea and other things. So I think they would get along with each other in that level. For Jude, I think he's most likely to get along with Layla because, first of all, Jude likes skateboarding, and I think Layla would also enjoy skateboarding. She has been shown, doing skateboarding. We've also seen, Layla doing surfing. She's also done roller skating as well. So Jude and Layla are going to get along with each other the most. However, in comparison, Jude is way too laid back for Layla. Maybe they get to learn from each other from that point. And for Jonesy, I think he's most likely to get along with Flora. Maybe Flora could help Jonesy to be more kinder. I think Flora has that personality that can shape other people's personalities, especially to someone like Jonesy. Not only that, both Flora and Jonesy are both Latinos or Latina, so they will have that in common. Anyway, this is my pairing. Stella with Caitlin, Bloom with Jan, Techno with Nikki, Misa with Wyatt, Layla with Jude, and Flora with Jonesy. Okay, now that the Winx have made friends with the 16 characters, it's now to give each Winx character some jobs. But before we talk about that, let's just remind ourselves what jobs the 16 characters have. Right now in my channel, I've only covered the first season of 16. I haven't gotten up to season 4 yet. But here are some facts about the 16 characters, about what their jobs are at the end of the show. So quite obvious, Caitlin has her lemon job, and Jenna, has her job at the penalty box. These two kept the same job in all 4 seasons, and it's kind of imaginable that they would keep the same job in the later seasons. So I can imagine, in season 5, they would keep the job. Nikki kind of quitted her job at, Khaki Barn. But we know what happens with Nikki throughout the show. She'll say she's gonna quit or get fired from Khaki Barn, but somehow she ends up back into this job. So she's either gonna, if season 5 still happen, she's probably gonna go back to Khaki Barn anyway. But if she is getting a new job, I imagine she's getting a job at travel agencies. Which, if she's into traveling, this is what she's into. At least this is what we, know about Nikki, at least a few times in this show. For Jude and Wyatt, they have their own new jobs. They're not working at Stick It and Spin This anymore. Because, in season 4, they have completely different jobs. For Wyatt, he works at flipping burgers. And for Jude, he works at Gamatorium, which is a video game store. And for Jonesy, he has every new job in every new episode. So in essence, we shouldn't really care about what Jonesy is gonna get. That is kind of Jonesy's shtick. He can't keep a job to save his life. So we got that established. To summarize, Kaylin is working at the Lemon, Jen is working at Penalty Box, um, Jude is working at Gamatorium, Wyatt is working at Burger McFlipsters, Nikki is working at possibly at Kaki Barn, and Josie is working at any job that he gets hired from, and also fired from as well. So anyway, if season 5 is happening, this is what will happen to the 16 characters at this point. Also, just to remind you, if I'm saying season 5 or 16, I would also say this like as season 9 for Winx Club. So what jobs would each of 16 characters have? I mean, I can have some ideas of which jobs which 16 characters would have. I'll start off talking about Bloom, and kind of have a great idea of what job she would have. I think she would work with Ron as a security guard, possibly as an assistant. I can imagine like Bloom working with Ron, to stop crime. But I think, Ron is obviously strict. I think Bloom will give a bit more heart to this job. She would obviously stop crime in the mall, but she's not gonna be as serious as Ron would. I think she would be more lenient. And I think as a security guard assistant, I think Bloom would have like a safety to the mall, and I think this works because like, what if a serious threat happened from a different like, what if like Wizard of the Black Circle caused chaos in the mall? She obviously, has like the first line of defense to, defend the mall. I think for Stella, she would work at Kakibon. And I think, the clones would, accept her immediately because, they share the same personalities. Stella would be like an additional blonde character with hyper energy. This would mean the star would have like 4 characters who are blonde, who would be against Nikki. And Nikki obviously can't stand their clothes. I think she would, butt heads with Stella, as well as, the clones. I think this would push Nikki's limit to quit her job at Kakibon and possibly leave to another job, probably at the travel agencies. I think there might be an issue with the clones and Stella though. There was that one episode where, they did hire a different blonde character, and, they didn't like having her presence because she would hog all the sales. And, the clones didn't like her, and they kind of missed Nikki because she didn't make any sales, so they didn't feel like competing with Nikki. And they made a claim like, oh, this is why they like Nikki. But maybe, who knows? I think, Stella might butt heads with the clones. And, at some point, maybe Stella could get along with Nikki. I think if Nikki, ends up in a different job, Stella might butt heads with the clones. I think they could potentially fire her. She might work at, Albatross and Finch, which is another clothing store. I think if Nikki comes back to Kakibon, I think things will go back to the status quo. There's obviously gonna be a kinship between Caitlyn and Stella. There may be like rivalry between them and Nikki, but who knows? They might blend with each other. It's very complex to think about. For Musa, she's obviously going to work at Spin This, a music star. I mean, I can't think of anything better. Like, could you imagine Musa working with Serena? And initially, I think this might draw, like, Wyatt getting back to, Spin This. But I doubt this is gonna go well because I think Serena and Wyatt are done with each other. They had enough of seeing each other. Also, in terms of romantic pairings, I think Wyatt is like done with both Serena and Marlo at this point. So for Wyatt, there's room for having romantic pairings. So I think it's possible that Misa and Wyatt, have their romantic pairings with each other. I don't know if like Wyatt would be accepted back to spin this by the amount of drama Serena and Wyatt has had. So I think in declaration, Wyatt's gonna keep his burger McFlippers, and Misa is gonna work at spin this. This is gonna be weird because like Wyatt is a musical guy, so what is he gonna do at Burger McFlippers? Maybe both Misa and Wyatt could ditch their jobs and pursue a music career with each other. Because there was that time where like Wyatt sang with a celebrity, remember? And I don't know why they never like progressed his music skills. I also think that like if Misa and Wyatt became love interests, I think I would like that pretty much. I think Misa and Wyatt would be a good ship pairing. But we already know, like, these characters do you have ideas about the shipping anyway? Like, uh, Bisa might have a, relationship with Wyatt. Maybe it won't last long. But I think it's better than their own relationships. Like, first of all, like, Wyatt and his relationship with Serena and Marlo hasn't been great. At least how it ended for both of them. And obviously, we know about Misa and Riven. Like, these two being together, it just wouldn't work. So I think, I'd be happy for them to be happy with each other. Anyway, let's move on to our next character. So we're going to talk about Tekna. Where will she work in 16? I mean, I can't think of anything better than for Tekna to work other than like Stereo Shack. Stereo Shack is where Darth, works, and it's an electronic gadget store. And I think obviously this is fitting for Tekna. I think for Tekna and Darth, I think they're just going to be friends. I don't think there will be any connections. For one thing, like Tekna is with Timmy, and I doubt Tekna is gonna be like cheating on Timmy for Darth, and I don't think Tekna would like Darth. Like just because they're both nerds doesn't mean they will get along. It's possible, like at best they might get along, but I also can see like Tekna and Darth like rubbing each other in the wrong way because like they both have that cold personality. They can be both rough with each other, possibly. I think it would be like a battle between the IQs. And now let's talk about Flora. Where would she be working? I think the best place for Flora to work is at Grimy, which is a coffee house. I think this fits Flora's personality really well. I bet in the coffee shop it would really smell really nice with the coffee and the scented, and it would fit, Flora's vibe. I think Flora provides like a warm presence, and she's gonna provide food for her friends. I can imagine her working with Charmaine. I also think like because if Flora works at at Grimy, I think it's possible like she might get like one-off relationships. I think she has that romantic aura about her, and it's possible like people like would like fall in love with her. And I don't know, maybe she might have one-offs with different people. I think she was obviously gonna stick with her boyfriend Helia, but maybe like Helia can let her off at some point and let her pursue some people. And I also can see like Flora being in a relationship with Jonesy, even though Jonesy and Nikki are together. I can see it like there possibly maybe a friendship. But I think there will be at least something there between Flora and Jonesy. I think if Flora was with Josie, Josie will soften up and be less, rude to women. I think he would respect women more because he's with Flora, who's like the most gentle character ever. And if not, I think like if they have romance with each other, I think it will be short lived. But I think when they're like no longer dating, they would remain being good friends with each other. So I think Flora and Josie they will have a good time, and I think they're gonna be like. I think their relationship is going to like last a few moments before they get back to the status quo relationship. So Flora is gonna go back to Helia, and Josie is going to back with Nikki. And I think for both of them, they're gonna have a healthy version of themselves with their current relationships. Like Jonesy is gonna soften up with Nikki, and I think for Flora, she's gonna have a little bit more backbone with Helia. And for Layla, I think she's gonna work out penalty box with Jan. I think for Jan and Layla, they are possibly going to make friends with each other, possibly relationship with each other. I can see that happening for both of them. I mean, I can. It's kind of obvious that like Layla would work at penalty box. Like she's sporty, athletic. She's into like sports and everything. And this is similar for Jen as well. And also, I think Jen has had, crushes on girls before. Like, I think she had, like, a female coworker, and they tried to make Jen and that coworker a thing. And I was like, yes, let that happen. And I think Jen and Layla, I think they would hit it off. I think I will talk about the romance aspect a little bit later, but yeah, that's my point. So just to clarify everything, Bloom would work as a security guard at the mall. Um, Stella is obviously going to work at either Khaki Bond or Albatross and Finch, possibly Albatross and Finch, if that's like a final straw for her. Misa is probably gonna work at Spin Disc. It's possible like she's gonna after that she's probably gonna pursue a music career with Wyatt. Who knows? Techna is working at Stereo Shack with Darth. Flora is working at Grimy, and Layla is working at Penalty Box with Jan. I think 3 out of the 3 Wiz characters like eventually going to work with 3 out of 3 16 characters in their jobs. Will be true for like Stella and Nikki, Misa and possibly Wyatt, and Jan and Layla. Let me know in the comments what you think. Anyway, since we talked about the jobs, let's move on to something else. Now I want to talk about the romantic relationships, the status quo relationships. In Wiz Club, the 6 main characters, Bloom, Stella, Misa, Techna, Flora, and Layla, each have a boyfriend. I know that this is kind of strange about Wiz Club. Like every female character needs to have a boyfriend. It needs to be heteronormative. And just to add, Wiz Club isn't the only show that will have like heteronormative casts. Like every girl has to have a boyfriend. There's a show called Trolls which also does the same thing. So Bloom's boyfriend is Sky, Stella's boyfriend is Brandon, Misa's boyfriend is Riven, Techna's boyfriend is Timmy, Flora's boyfriend is Helia, and Layla's boyfriend is Naboo. I know that Naboo dies in season 4, and Layla gets new boyfriends, but I don't care. In my head canon, Naboo is the only boyfriend good for Layla. Roy and Nex have nothing for Naboo. So I want to make that clear. If the crossover did happen, the six boyfriends of Winx Club will stay with the Winx girls. That includes Nabi staying with Layla. For the 16 characters, we already have two main characters who are already in a relationship with each other, and that's Jonesy and Nikki, so they are confirmed to being together. So since Jonesy and Nikki are obviously official, you might as well pair the other four characters with each other. And also, there's no point, getting like new boyfriends or girlfriends for the other fours, like especially for Caitlyn, who has like multiple boyfriends each episode. Also, Jen had a couple of boyfriends. We all know Wyatt with his relationship with Serena and Marlo, and I don't think I would want them to be back together. The only thing I can think of, like Jude being back to Star, because they were wholesome. I like Jude and Star together. But if we can't have that, I think it's best to pair the main characters together. So if this crossover did happen, I would want to pair Wyatt with Jen. I think both Wyatt and Jen would understand each other. They're both like mature of the group. Like Jen is the most mature girl in the females, and Wyatt is like the most mature male from the males. And then I would have to ship Jude and Kaylin together. I think Jude and Kaylin together will be really cute. They have had moments with each other that I found endearing in the show. So if this crossover did happen, Jude and Kaylin are together, and Jen and Wyatt are together. So I do want to make that clear. Also, but by pairing the remaining characters, it helps. It prevents the cast from being bloated. Like we don't want to have like billions of characters in this crossover. I think 24 characters is enough for this crossover. So that's my point. But since we're having 16 and Winx Club adapt to each other's formula, I think the male characters of 16 will fade into being supporting roles rather than being main characters. Because in the Winx Club, the male characters are put in, as a supporting role. They're not the main characters. So Jonesy, Jude, and Wyatt will end up, fading into background. Just like how the specialists are in Winx Club. So this main characters becomes from 12 main characters to 9 main characters. And I think having 9 main characters is better than having 12 or 24. So anyway, if the Winx are gonna stay in Canada for a short period of time, maybe in like the entire of season 9 or season 5, eventually they will have to, help the 16 characters adapt to their universe. This would mean that, Kaylin, Jen, and Nikki would probably learn how to use magic. And who knows, they may end up being fairies as well. Also, I need to point out, like, in the Winx universe, the fairies tend to be females. We do have male fairies at some point, like few moments, but like majority is usually females. And for the specialists, they are usually males. But obviously, we will sprinkle in some female specialists. But since we're gonna simplify things, we're gonna have the females obviously being fairies, and we're gonna have the males being the specialists, because that tends to be how it goes in the Winx Club universe. So Jen, Caitlin, and Nikki are fairies, and Jonesy, Wyatt, and Jude will become specialists. And now that the girls are fairies now, we will have to give them superpowers, just like how the Winx are. And because we have these new fairies, I think we need to simplify the Winx powers. Like originally, Bloom would be the fairy of the Dragonfire, Stella would be the fairy of the Sun and Moon, Flora would be the fairy of nature, Misa would be fairy of music, Techno would be the fairy of technology, and for Layla, she seems to be the fairy of morphics. But since we're gonna like have these shows be merged, is I think it's better idea to like simplify their powers. Because if you're not a Winslow fan, you might think their powers are rather too complex and complicated. So I might as well change their powers. So Bloom would become the fairy of fire instead of the fairy of dragonfire. I would change Stella to Fairy of Light instead of the Fairy of Sun and Moon, so she controls light powers. Misa would become the Fairy of Sound instead of the Fairy of Music. I would change Techna into Fairy of Electricity instead of the Fairy of Technology. And then Flora would become the Fairy of Plants instead of the Fairy of Nature. And then Layla will become the fairy of water instead of the fairy of morphics. So since we're gonna change Winx's powers to simplify them, let's give the three girls from 16 their powers. I think if Caitlin became a fairy, I would change her to the fairy of plasma. So maybe she would have the powers that Layla originally had. And I think it will suit her because she would have pink powers. And, Caitlyn wears pink all the time. I think I would have Jen being the fairy of winds. And she would have like air-based powers, kind of like Aang from Avatar The Last Airbender. And I think Wind would suit Jen really well because she's like sporty and things. So that's what I think of when I think of Jen. And since Nikki has like a grungy personality, she's kind of a punk personality, I would have Nikki being the fairy of darkness. I think that would be suitable for her. So the 9 of these characters become one single entity, and I think they become a whole group. Anyway, since we covered the girls of the shows, it's time to talk about the boys and make them the specialists. So the specialists will obviously have the matching uniform with their signature color, like we have for them in the Winx universe. Like each specialist seems to be designated to a weapon and their color. Like Sky's main color seems to be a cyan, and his main weapon is a sword and a shield. Brandon's main color is green, and his weapon is a double-bladed sword. River's main color seems to be red, and his weapon seems to be like a dagger and a ball and chain. Timmy's main color is yellow, and his main weapon is a gun. Helio's main color is orange, and his main weapon are strings, kind of like Spider-Man. Nabi's main color is purple, and he carries a magic staff. So what's my decision for the boys in 16? If they became a specialist, what would their main color be, and what would their main weapon be? I think if I'm gonna have Wyatt being a specialist, I'm gonna have his main color being pink because we're lacking a pink character in the specialist group. I think it's nice to have a male character with the pink color. So anyway, the main weapon for Wyatt, I will give him 2 swords. Like he's going to get 2 sabers. I think the reason I'm giving him these 2 weapons because I know there's a specialist in the Winx universe named Bishop who has these weapons, and I think they are really cool. And it's a shame because Bishop is a background character, and I would have loved to see his weapon used a lot more. So I would give this to Wyatt, let him have these weapons. And obviously these weapons and his main color are going to be pink. Let Wyatt have pink. Yes. So Jude's main color is going to be lime green. And his main weapon is going to be a boomerang. The reason I give him the boomerang is because I know this is one of Sky's weapons, but I would want to simplify them to having one weapon each, and I think the boomerang is pretty cool. So he's going to have that. So since Jade is getting the boomerang, what is Josie getting? And I think his main color is going to be like dark blue. And I think I want to give him like Wolverine claws. I think that will be cool for Jonesy. Because I know in the Winx universe there seems to be a character with claws. I think I noticed him in in the finale of season 1, I think. So why not give the weapons to Jonesy from a background character to a character that needs it? And I think having claws it will be really fun as a weapon. Now we have all that. I think we have settled our show. And I think since this is a crossover, I think we might as well, rename this show. So I'm gonna call it Winxteen. I think that's really fitting. I think it's like merging Winx Club and 16 together, dropping the club and dropping the 6. Shoving Winx and Teen together, it fits really well. And I think it fits because the Winx and 6 has an X at the end. So like when it's put together, it seems to mimic 16. So Winxteen is the official name of this crossover I'm presenting. It's like our own very own Justice League. So anyway, that's how I'm going to conclude my crossover with these two shows. I'm turning it to one show. Also, calling it Winxteen, I think that's pretty clever. This brings me back memories when I would do a crossover between Winx Club and Ruby, and that was like a year ago. Anyway, if you enjoyed this crossover, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and have a lovely day.